Hello, little helpers. Thank you for welcoming us back after our spontaneous break. We want to address that actually because we talk on this podcast about mental health all the time in kind of an abstracted way, but really mental health is something that affects us as well. And it affects our relationships, and sometimes different mental health issues kind of collide in ways that can cause problems, right? So Kibby and I wanted to talk a little bit about why we took a break and also what's been going on primarily in your life, Kibby, after having your baby. So this episode is going to be about postpartum depression. And we've done an episode on PPD before, but that was pre-baby and pre-personal engagement with PPD. So, and Kibby, I know you're a little bit nervous about talking about this today. How do you feel right now?
Still nervous. Yeah, I think I can't even tell what's the postpartum depression. It was just the nervousness about being vulnerable. But I've been my self-esteem has been really low. And so even just to talk about myself and talk about what I've been going through to all you, it's scary.
What parts of your, like, why do you think your self-esteem in particular is low?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this podcast, and I feel like it's just such a common thing that I'm going through that I feel like it would have been not right to just hide it and pretend that we know everything and continue being our like, I guess, knowledgeable selves with science, and be like, instead kind of lean into how difficult it's been. I think part of it is parenting, and part of it is a lot of struggles that people dealing with now. The economy's bad. Things are shifting. I don't know. Like, I feel like everyone I've talked to, like, no one's doing well now. Everyone's like burnt out. Everyone kind of feels a little bit more lost than they did before. And I don't really know why. Maybe Mercury or some planets in retrograde, who knows? But my self-esteem has been kind of at an all-time low because I was recently diagnosed with postpartum depression. Which is crazy because I worked with people with postpartum depression. I knew all of the risk factors. I tried to do everything I could to protect myself from that, and yet it still got me. I still feel it.
Yeah, there's something weird about being a therapist and feeling like, okay, we're supposed to have all the answers and we should prevent this, and we know the skills. And so if we already know the skills, then how is somebody else going to help us? And how could this have happened?
Yeah. It took me by surprise. And I think it's crazy to look at the research because postpartum depression is so common. You were sending me stats, and it was very wildly up to like 82% of people, of mothers, struggle with it.
Well, let's be clear, Kibby. The stats actually said that it's something like 1.4% to 84% of the population has PPD, which is just shorthand for people are not measuring as well.
Right. Either no one has it or everyone has it. But that's to say, I mean, anecdotally, a lot of the mothers that I've talked to, probably most of the mothers, have gone through a period of this. Where roughly half of the people I know are on antidepressants. And basically it creeps up in you because with parenting, there's so many changes all at once. So it kind of feels like you're in a whirlwind of trying to catch up and try to figure out how to feed my baby. How do I get up in the morning? How do I sleep? How do I do this? Oh my God, they're crying, right? So then slowly you kind of lose yourself. And I heard that around this time, around when the kids hit about 6 months or so, it's actually a high time for postpartum depression because you're expected, or I'm expecting myself to go back to work, go back to my normal life. I'm out of the grace period of maternity leave and supposed to go back to the way things are, and nothing is the same. And so there's a lot of self-esteem issues because there's all my identity is shifted around. Like I feel like I have no solid footing. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what parts of me are gone and what might come back. I'm realizing the full impact of how much parenting has changed in my life, and sometimes getting really angry about it. And these are kind of these secret things that every mother feels, but we don't put it on social media. So
Yeah, I remember when we did our last postpartum episode, she was talking about all of the factors that change that can lead to this, like our bodies, our relationships with our spouse, our relationship with work, our relationship with free time, our priorities, our relationships with our friend. I mean, it's just like every single part of life is being so impacted by this that I left that episode feeling like, well, the norm has to be postpartum depression.
Right. Yeah, I've described, the things that I've struggled with to other moms, and they're like, yeah, totally. Me too. It's awful. So it's not like I have like a pretty good setup. I have a lot of resources, I have a lot of support, and yet here I am. And what happened was, I think the thing that impacted me the most was sleep changes. We were traveling a bit to Durham and to Asia to see my family. My son started to not sleep so well, and which is kind of normal anyway. And what that looked like was he would wake up 2 or 3 times a night, and we would have to basically do gymnastics to get him back to sleep. We would have to bounce him standing up for 15, 20 minutes. And then we put him in the crib and his eyes pop open, and then you have to restart it all over again while you're so deeply exhausted that my arms and body would be shaking because I'm so tired. So there's that, right? And that was happening weeks after weeks after weeks, right? You have these chronic sleep deprivation, and just realizing slowly, like, oh my God, I used to love and dedicate myself to work.
Yeah.
And now when you're sleeping 2 or 3 hours at a stretch at night, can I do what I did before? Will I ever be able to? Like, once I get sleep again, will I have the capacity and time and energy to devote to work again? If not, who am I? What do I do? Every minute of your day is hooked onto, it's really determined by this kid's needs. And I had no idea how much freedom I had as before having kids. Like, you just take it for, you don't know any differently. You take it for granted. Every decision you make on a daily basis is actually very driven by your needs, right? Like, do I want lunch now? Do I want to take a break? Oh my gosh, I feel really sick today. I'm going to take a sick day. I need to rest. I need to work. Like, you can time yourself based on your needs and the people around you. But now all of my time is borrowed, right? It's like, okay, he needs to be fed. He needs to sleep. He needs this. Is either me, or I need to hire or recruit someone else to make sure those needs are met. Right. That shifts like existentially, but also on a day-to-day basis. Right. Even right now, I'm paying someone else to take care of him so I can tell you guys about this stuff. Right. Right. That's so different. So, I mean, I started to slip, and every single thing felt so hard. Every little thing. And I could see the depression came when my thoughts just started to get catastrophic. Like, I can't do anything anymore. Who am I? Is my life always going to feel like this? Why did I do this? I will never be able to get out. I'm, just, I don't know how people have multiple kids, right? They just went, my thoughts went from 0 to 60, and just like the future just looked bleak. And that's not like me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, I was about to say it was hard being your friend. I didn't mean that. It wasn't hard to be your friend. It was hard being your friend and hearing, those things, because it just caused concern, right? I mean, you once described motherhood as being chained to a wall and being shocked every few hours. I was like, Jesus, that's bleak. That is bleak. And if that's where her mind is, then like there's something's got to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And the sad part is more normal than people think, I have to say, because the sleep deprivation is common, and just this feeling of that you're tied to something that you've never been tied to in the same way before. And you keep having to respond to its needs, no matter how exhausted you are. And to be fair, like, there's lots of moments. I mean, I do this because I love him. So there is that love there. I have these beautiful moments with him. But when they're young, they don't give a lot back. They're just
Mm-hmm.
needing things from you, and they don't, their personalities only start to shine and come out and get more interactive after 7 months. So it's really common for the men to not bond with babies until after 6 months. Even women find it hard because they're like giving, giving, giving with not a lot back. So it does
Yeah.
kind of feel like, when I was really deep down in it, it felt like torture.
Yeah. I remember like when you first gave birth, and we did an episode back then too.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this stuff came up, but it didn't have that same kind of, yeah, catastrophic feel to it. Like this is never going to end feel. It felt more like new mother, not really sleeping
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
everything has changed. And it kind of felt like the depression started worsening after the time that you had allotted yourself to expect to feel that bad.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
it was kind of like those first 3 months, first 4 months, whatever. Yeah, everyone talks about how miserable that is,
Mm-hmm.
but people don't talk about how it's 6 months. It's still miserable. You're still not sleeping, and now you're back at work,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and now the
Mm-hmm.
baby's heavier and screaming
Yeah.
louder, and yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's so weirdly enough, it's so consuming in the early months that that's all you're doing.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm chilling watching TV in between, right? And now I'm like, oh, I have to squeeze my regular work and also working out and eating healthy and seeing my friends and all the things that I care about, and also still having a thing that needs you. So it feels a lot harder now. And there's also hormonal shifts, which make it hard too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So one thing that's particular to you, I mean, not totally particular to you, but talking about work. And
Mm-hmm.
in yeah, like working plus baby just sounds miserable. But what is unique to you is how much a part of your identity work has always been, and how
Mm-hmm.
attached to working you've been, and how important that's been for your sense of self. What's that been like?
Horrible. I mean, that's that's where my self-esteem is tanked. And also, I mean, the economy's not great. So it's just I there's a general feeling of low morale in the world.
Mhm.
But yeah, I used to be able to do what I did by working like 12 hours a day every day, right?
Yeah.
And I found a lot of pride in working no matter what, and just doing the hard thing, doing a PhD, doing all the research, doing all the writing a grant, and just buckling down and doing it no matter what. And now I can't. Now I don't have that option to, and I don't know what that means.
Hmm.
Do I take a part-time job? Do I give up career? Do I um some mothers even feel like their child gives them so much purpose that they don't need work anymore, or it just suddenly they realize it's not important at all.
Yeah.
I do have to say that's not me. I know that a lot of mothers shift on that, but I feel like I love him so much, and I don't think being a parent can be my only identity.
Yeah.
So now what? Like how do
Yeah.
I now what do I do? Right?
Hmm.
It's eh, I'm at a loss for words. I'm at a loss for like knowing what to do now.
I mean, it seems like there's been this sense of major urgency, like you have to get back into work, and you've been
Yeah.
applying for a lot of jobs. I mean, what do you think about the idea of just taking a break, or just taking a break just feel impossible to you for some reason?
Yeah, I think that's part of why depression. And now I just have so much more empathy for depression and people struggling with it, because it's been a while since I've actually really struggled with it. And
Hmm.
I could see that my thoughts can't even reach the future, and
Mm.
find that optimism for, I'll get back to myself. I will regain a sense of self and productivity and pride in my work. I'm just like, well, if I could take a break, that's it. That's it. I'll never be able to come back.
That's such an interesting way to put it. My thoughts can't even reach the future. It's been
Hmm.
so long since I've been depressed that I forgot about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is so hard to see, like if you just let go in some respect, that the future will, provide for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what everyone is saying. That is the thing that, in terms of things that loved ones can do to help. That is something that is helpful, but it's very hard for it to land with me. Like our advisor, has said this to me. My therapists, like my friends and family, all have said this to me, like, go easy on yourself, take it slow. Don't expect yourself to get back to the old Kibby pre-pregnancy. Maybe parts of that will be important will come back because you'll work hard to get it, but other stuff, will have to shift. And I'm just like, I can't take a break, because if I do, I'll lose myself entirely. So yeah, that's a catastrophic thought that I just can't get past. Like I have a hard time having faith in the future.
Yeah. So what does help? I mean, because I mean my experience with depression was, as soon as I let go of everything, that's when I found salvation from it.
Really?
As soon as
How?
I let go of the career that I was in that made me so depressed. I let go of going to New York. I let go of the friends. I mean, I kept my friends, but I mean, I let go of like being where they were. I moved at home with my family. I went to Asia. That was like, I was so lucky and fortunate that, that I was able to afford that. But yeah, I mean, it was when I removed the things that made me miserable and really told myself, no, I'm not going to focus on exertion right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let myself heal and then start again.
Yeah.
And that's what helped.
Yeah. I hope to get there. I think one of the hard things with this shift, and I'm talking as a parent, but I know that a lot of people out there are like, got let go from their jobs and are, go through similar shifts and are struggling with something similar, where it's like you have to reevaluate what's important and figure out what's worth your time and energy, right? And the thing is that I don't know what those are entirely. I think the basics for postpartum depression I'm working on, which is just getting like basic needs met. One thing that was hugely helpful was I hired a sleep coach. And I said I'd plug her because she was so, so good. Her business is called Your Zen Baby Sleep. So yourzenbabysleep.com. Her name is Sarah Basio. There are many other coaches that are amazing and all programs, but basically I just did this really difficult program where it helped my baby learn how to sleep on his own, which isn't that a crazy thing? Like, babies need to eat and sleep and they don't know how to do it. So we could do it for them. Like, I could stand up and bounce him for 30 minutes at a time until my back breaks, or I tolerate listening to him scream and yell as he learns to put himself back to sleep at night. And I mean, there's many things I could say about it, but it basically went from me getting like 5 hours of sleep in total broken up over the night to now he sleeps all night long. I could sleep a normal night, and I could even see my brain slowly coming back. So that is, sleep deprivation is no joke. I mean, it really takes you to dark places, and now I could see that my mind is like at least functioning.
Yeah, I mean, I don't operate well on one day of no sleep. So the idea of 6 months is pretty impossible. Can you do it earlier than 6 months in? Or you're at 8 months now, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was a fine sleep. The babies sometimes have trouble sleeping just randomly in, like 5 months, 6 months, suddenly they stop sleeping well, for whatever reason, growth, teething, whatever. And so we had to basically train him back. So you can, but we didn't need it before then. And we just kept thinking it will resolve itself, and it didn't, until both Alex and I were just desperate. We just got to a place where we really resented parenting. And I saw, like, even us picking him up and playing with him during the day, both of us, I could see us like having a little anger towards him and feeling kind of resentful and just depressed. And both of us, our minds were just in the in the toilet, and every little thing made me cry. So I got desperate enough to get some sleep training help.
Were you able to tell yourself it's normal to hate your child sometimes? I'm not literally hate, but like to be angry with him.
No,
or was that really getting you down?
There's actually old psychodynamic theories that talk about that very clearly, and how countertransference, that a therapist will sometimes hate their patients, is actually a normal process of, the caregiving role.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess it's like this kind of like there needs to be a separation, there needs to be a self-preservation response, right? There's like I recognize how big of a burden it is to and responsibility is to take care of you, and I'm angry about it because it takes away from me, right?
Yeah.
um and it is normal, and it's and I know that even just saying this, oh, there's a lot of people going, oh my God, like, how could you? But no, like, there's just some days where I just hate my baby. And
Yeah.
I don't hate him. I hate parenting. I
Yeah.
hate that I can't spend all day doing whatever I want. If I want to
Mm-hmm.
take a nap, I want to go to yoga. If I want to travel, I
Mm-hmm.
can't. I can't live wherever I want, like
Mm-hmm.
so much of my life now is determined by someone else. I just like, I'm suddenly like, oh my God, like I hate that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a normal part of parenting, apparently. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, I just think it's important to point out because there's such a taboo against saying that. And yet, how could you not hate parenting sometimes?
mhm.
Like, it does take a lot from you. And it's the one role, well, there's more, but it's one of the major roles that there's no interview for, there's no training for
Yeah.
really. You just don't know what you're getting into. And I mean, I've said to people like, I don't want to hear how miserable it is because I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm just going to
Hmm.
find out then. I don't even want to worry about it beforehand.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just like, I mean, and I'm fine. You're free to tell me about how terrible it is. That's something I've just said in the past because I'm like, yeah, nothing's going to change my mind, and I know it's going to be terrible, but nothing that's said now is going to prepare me for it
Yeah.
because that's just a totally different.
I think that's right, because what really struck me was how becoming parents, you just have no idea what comes out of you. Like you
Mhm.
shift as a person, your behavior is different, your identity changes so much. There are things that I do with my child that I never expected, and same with Alex. Like there are some of my friends who thought they would hate parenting, like they just went through all pregnancy thinking that they're just gonna resent it the entire way, and actually
Mhm.
they love it, right?
Mhm.
I thought I was going to be a tough mom who's like values like learning and achievement and doing well, and actually like I'm a super softie, like I just like any sign of distress from him and I'm like I freak
Oh,
out,
I'm
right?
so surprised.
I'm surprised. Fine, maybe it's not so surprising. But
The
yeah,
major empath doesn't like it when her baby
good point. All right,
cries.
that's a good point. Maybe I see myself differently than I actually am. It's self-awareness. That's the barrier. But yeah, like sometimes like the way your mom and dad were like come out of
Yeah.
you. You suddenly start to emulate them because that's what parenting, and then you're like, "Oh my God, I'm just like my parents."
Goodness, who have you emulated, your mom or your dad? Because those would be radically
Oh, that's a
different.
good point. My mom more than I thought. And
Yeah.
I talked to my mom too, and I think she also struggled with some postpartum depression. She felt very
Mhm.
lonely. And she also said, like, I couldn't believe this because she was a dedicated stay-at-home mom until the mental health issues. But she said that she had moments of thinking like, oh my God, why did I do this? This is so
Yeah.
hard. This never ends. Um, because it's the most permanent decision I've ever made, right?
Mhm.
Like you could
Mhm.
change everything else. So you can move, you could get divorced, change careers, but
Yeah.
you are a mom, and I
Yeah.
can't get rid of that.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I've often thought, I mean, it's funny, people ask me a lot why I want to be a mom.
mhm,
And I mean, at this point, I think there's kind of something automatic about it. I've just always automatically wanted to be a mom, and that's probably something to investigate. But there's something about like the fact that I still haven't met myself in a way, like
mhm,
I still haven't met the mom version of me. Like that's a
mhm,
whole other person in certain ways.
mhm.
I still haven't had the greatest love of all. I mean, I still haven't gone on this incredible adventure. I'm just trying to bore myself as much as possible before I get there so that once I'm there, I'm not like, I still have all these bucket list items to do. And I'm just
Mhm.
sitting there being like, no, everything's crossed off and bored. I might as well just poop one out, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. What no one has met the parent version of them until they have kids, right? And
Hmm.
it is really hard to predict. It's like I feel like I knew myself pretty well. And I'm just like, who am I now?
Yeah.
Which is the cool part and the scary part.
Yeah.
And I, now people who are on the fence to having kids, like, I understand. I'm not going to say yes or no either way. There are beautiful moments that I wouldn't take back, but it's a no joke decision. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, I didn't realize how much of my life is going to change or has changed. Um, and I think this is the part that has affected our relationship, like you and me. And there is a big shift in how I connect to and understand other parents' experience, and how I know that people who without kids don't fully know the scope of my experience now.
Yeah.
Which is a really hard thing to say, because I remember being on the other end, not having kids and wanting them so badly, and feeling like all my friends with kids are bonding in a particular way, as if like they kind of rolled my eyes at, my complaint. I mean, very kindly, but I could tell that they had other things going on in their life, like I'm a less a priority, or like as if there was a gap between my experience and their experience, and it was painful. And now I get it. Now when I text you about parenting, I think I really kind of lean into being not dramatic, but really like emphasizing the negativity, because I don't know how else to try to explain it to you. Like with other parents, I text, I'm having a bad day, and they're like, oh, I got it, but it's hard for me to tell someone like you or people without kids, like what a hard day looks like.
Yeah.
Because it's really unique.
I get that. I mean, I've certainly sensed that, that there is now that divide.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of those things where it does kind of suck in a way, but it's also totally inevitable. I mean, it's just what happens when somebody goes through like a radically different life experience. And I've experienced that in much smaller ways, like post bachelor, me trying to explain like why I'm having a bad day because I saw something on Reddit, and just being like, it's not something that another person will experience until they have massive amounts of hate and insults coming at them for a day. I don't want to like compare the two experiences, but it's just in smaller ways. Like I've experienced that as well. And a divide is there.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting to talk about. I mean, I'll say, it does feel as if you've graduated to this new level of like legitimacy or something, like having real hardship, having real responsibility. And then there is kind of this dynamic of me feeling like less legitimate, or like, I mean, any problem that I bring is going to be naturally kind of not as important. And I don't totally know what to do about that, because the reality is like your life is harder than mine right now. So yeah.
It's hard in a unique way. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's hard. Like I still am not, I still wouldn't subscribe to saying like, oh, my life is harder and someone's struggle is harder than someone else's. It's everyone has their struggles. It's just something unique about parenting. It's a unique feeling of, I am so at the bottom of my exhaustion. I can't go any further. I can't bounce this kid for one more second. I'm going to break.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, he still needs to be bounced and you have to keep going. Which is something that I personally haven't experienced before in that particular way. And it's hard. I mean, this all comes up because, with our hiatus, is it okay if I tell the general story? I mean, it's so funny because our podcast is about helping people, or like what loved ones can do with someone struggling with mental health. And then we had a situation like trying to record an episode where usually we record things really flexibly. Like if we try to set a meeting, if something comes up, we reschedule and figure out a time to make these recordings happen. There was one time that we tried to record a couple weeks ago where we set a time and your schedule was messed up and basically you couldn't do it at the time that we agreed on.
I had just completely blanked on it. It was a total ADHD. I mean, it was honestly like when I realized what I'd done, I was like, it had this feeling that's very known to me with this
Mm,
disorder of like, how the fuck did I do that? Like, how
mm-hmm.
the fuck did I do that? You had even texted me earlier in the day something about that topic, but it was just like so bizarre. Like it felt so out of my control, and yet it should have been in my control. And then
Yeah.
this panic of like, how am I going to fix this? And just also this overwhelming feeling of like, this is so stupid. Like, how something so
Mm.
stupid happened. It's so just that.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't see all, like I kind of could guess
Yeah.
that that's what it's so funny now that we're talking about like two people with different kinds of disorders like clashing, right?
Yeah.
Or the moments where this is coming in conflict because something like that would have been frustrating, but we would have rescheduled. But on my end, in order to make that time work, I was so sleep deprived, I was insane. So even
Yeah.
reading papers to prepare was so hard. And then I had to get the baby down because otherwise you hear the screaming in the background. So I was like, I rearranged all the nap and feeding schedules and bounced him so hard. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and if I just explain like, I had to rearrange my schedule to make this happen, it might not have seemed that big a deal, but I was like at a breaking point. And then when we couldn't record, I literally broke down crying. I just like,
Yeah.
I snapped at you and I texted basically something to the effect of what I was frustrated about, which is like, I can't explain to you how hard this stuff is for me now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so frustrating. And then I just had to like leave. I was like, you know, that's
Yeah.
one of the moments I knew I was really struggling with depression, where something that in the past would have been like a normal work frustration that we would have problem
Right.
solved, it was like intolerable for me.
Yeah.
And we had to first of all, we had to like, you and I had to talk through that. And I still was like, I don't know how to explain what it was like for me to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that I at any point thought it was unreasonable that you were upset.
Mm-hmm.
I was upset at you snapping at me, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger point was just like, given how hard that is, and given how little trust I have in myself, and that's just a fact. Like that, having, I think the biggest problem with ADHD for me is that I can never fully trust myself. And that was that feeling that came to me when I realized I'd flubbed on the recording time, because it was like, this is not hard, and yet
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
still, like, there was a reminder earlier in the day, and yet still. And knowing that that wasn't avoidance, that wasn't like I just didn't want to think about it and so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, that
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't anything intentional, just having so little faith in myself, to be able to control my life in certain ways. And 90%, well, I don't know if the number is that high. I was going to say 90% of the time I can, but that other 10%, it's so threatening to so many
Yeah.
different things. I mean, I do live in fear of like missing a patient appointment or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just so scared that I was going to do something like that again and then cause that much pain again
Right.
for
Right.
you,
Yeah.
and then get hurt myself. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I really didn't mean to, in that moment, I know that what you might have been afraid of or felt was like me like attacking you or saying, looking down on you for that. That's not the case. Like I know like both you and I actually do a really good job in our friendship of accepting like who we are as people, like all of
Mm-hmm.
our flaws and our benefits. And I do know that it's a part of you that sometimes like you mess up on schedules, and most of the time that's just something that's just part of us working together, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, I'm you might not know this, but I actually text you things about episodes in advance for that reason, to like put it on your mind. Like
Embarrassing.
I do that on purpose. Yeah, like that's just
Yeah.
like small things that I do to like kind of work with that. And that's okay until I am at like a zero capacity, right?
Right.
And then that's the part that is so frustrating to me, is that academia requires certain things from people to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
Working on this podcast requires certain amount of flexibility to do it the way we did before. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not unable to meet those,
Yeah.
standards as I did before. What does that mean? Does academia flex for me? Do jobs flex for me? Do people around me accommodate? Like, what does that mean? I think you and I, came to, talk through this. I think that's one thing that was helpful, is that we both, I knew that we couldn't do this on text, because I know that when I text people, there's so many fights in my life, because the texts that I send read to people as way more judgmental and harsh than I mean. Usually it's me like getting mad at myself for being frustrated at the situation, and it comes across as like I'm mad at that person.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened, like, think about it, with like all my major people. And once we talk through it in person, or I say what I'm trying to say on the text, people are like, oh, okay, you're not like, you don't hate me, right? So
I mean,
yeah.
I think there's also this part of you where, like, Kibby, you're somebody that people take seriously. And that's a great thing about you. But when the other person has just fucked up, it can feel like you're
Yeah,
above me,
yeah.
Like, and that is just it's just hard. And also, like, I do think I was readily interpreting things as angry because I just felt like I was living in a sea of anger in my last
Yeah,
relationship. And I'm
yeah.
just so sensitive to it, because it just brings
Mm-hmm.
me right back there. So that's like another intersection, right? Of like mental health shit. That wasn't a disorder I had, but it is a scar that I have from my previous relationship, just like a new kind of
Yeah,
sensitivity.
yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely try to not be like that. I don't adopt that mindset of like that I'm above you as a person. I do have to say that I will own that in the moments where I'm like working my ass off to make something happen, there
Yeah.
is like a self-righteousness of like, I did like the maximum I can to make this
Mm-hmm.
work, and you
Mm-hmm.
didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a frustration that I've definitely felt with other people, so I understand that, like, I probably came across as like patronizing, or like it is kind of this I've felt this on the other end, so I feel embarrassed saying this, but when parents say, or new parents say, like, you don't understand how hard it is for me, you don't even know, you don't have kids, it's so easy for you, like, now I'm like, yeah, they were totally right. It's way easier to not have a kid. So yeah, I could see that there's like a condescending tone with my frustration in that moment. And that's not like, yeah, I mean, that's
That's okay. That's all I needed.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like how to loved ones deal with it. I mean, we're both kind of dealing with each other's stuff, and you're getting the brunt of dealing with my depression, where I can't do as much as I could before. I'm mad about that. I'm mad at the world for being as hard as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what to do about it. I mean, after all that, I think I really um I talked to my therapist, and went and got more help, and so now I'm taking antidepressants, so that's something
Oh
that,
yeah.
yeah, I'm taking Zoloft, and I apparently, new mothers often are prescribed Zoloft because it doesn't transfer in breast milk that much as other types, but
That is true. I do want to add, just from my research today,
Mhm.
that is why Zoloft is the first line of defense. However, pretty much, I mean, most SSRIs are also fine.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the baby only takes in like less than 10%. And apparently that's like a safe amount. So if you are like, I'm on Lexapro, right? Which
Mm-hmm,
I'm trying to
mm-hmm,
taper off of. But
mm-hmm.
if I were to get pregnant or to be breastfeeding, they would put me back on Lexapro. They wouldn't try to put me on Zoloft.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah. So I just
yeah.
don't want people to feel like they have to
Right.
do Zoloft or nothing.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. My psychiatrist said that whatever works for that person, that's what they'll
Yeah.
prescribe. But Zoloft is, if you don't know, Zoloft is the one they prescribe first. But a huge plug for, if you are experiencing any issues of like depression or anxiety in pregnancy or postpartum, even like more than 6 months, year out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't like talk to a doctor about it, because it is so much better for the baby and you to get treatment and even
Yeah.
meds for this, than to say, no, I'm not going to take any meds even if I need it. So I mean, talk to a doctor,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I'm a huge fan of meds, even though we need to do a psychiatry episode
We do.
because we need to talk about the downsides too, which includes like I've been trying to withdraw from this goddamn medication for
Oh,
months, and
interesting.
I've been coasting on half a dose for a while, but um, people have a lot of stigma about this and a lot of fear about taking meds, but we don't. I think what's less understood is that stress and anxiety and depression, those all have bad outcomes for the baby.
Yeah.
Worse outcomes than taking Zoloft.
Yeah, definitely.
And also from my research today, I guess PPD is much more common in women who had depression during pregnancy and it went
Mm-hmm.
untreated. So
Mm-hmm.
really pay special attention to the depression you have during pregnancy. And that might be, I know it's like scary going on a medication when you have a fetus inside you, but it is a better way to go than to be depressed.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the stress and depression can affect the fetus as well. So, I mean, not to scare you guys, but it's scary for me because there's just so much we want to do. Like, oh, is breast milk? There's so many considerations of what to do for your baby to try to be the best mom, and there's sometimes no right answers. But I'm now like really saying like taking care of yourself is necessary because I got to the point where my burnout as a mom was like at an all-time high. And now, okay, I'll also say that I did have hopes that antidepressants would make me like, I don't know, be like confident and happy and engaged and feel a sense of purpose. Like I thought it would fix all the things and make you feel the way I want to feel, or maybe the way I feel like right after I have a good cup of cold brew and you're like, I could take on this to-do list, no problem. It does not. It just makes I could see my catastrophic thinking better. I could take a step back from it. I know it's depression. I know I'm reacting to a lot of hard things. It doesn't fix the problems. Like I'm still going through a lot of loss. But I get dragged down a lot less. I don't go into as many spirals. I am able to have a little bit of I can use more coping mechanisms like, you know what, I probably should go to yoga a little bit more and also give myself a break from needing to have the perfect job right now. So a little bit, little bit, but
I'm happy to hear that.
yeah, I mean, it's still, that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing. But if you think that the antidepressants is like a fix-all, it's not. It just gives you a little bit more, I would say like agency or control over the way you feel. Would you say that that's true or?
Yeah, I mean, taking Lexapro did not make me a superhero, and it didn't make me leap out of bed in the morning excited to tackle the day. One thing it did was it really brought down my physical anxiety, which I found very disruptive. And yeah, it made it so that I could think in much clearer ways. And at the time when I went on it, I spent all day long going, should we break up? Should we not break up? Should we break up? Should we not? Is this what love is supposed to feel like? Is it not what love is supposed to feel like? Just like 50-50 on everything. I was just sitting on a fence. And that really cleared up, and I was just able to see like I can do this. I'm in control. Like the future has gifts that I don't know about yet. Just allowed me to have some faith, I guess. I felt like I had a much cleaner, clearer brain and body. Yeah. And I didn't have like random, like this is a thing coming off of it now. I'm noticing that I have these like random bursts of depressed mood, which I'm like, what the fuck? Nothing's wrong. Like I'm having a good day. And I'm having to come to terms with like, that might not be medication withdrawal. That just is probably what my brain was like before.
Yeah.
And I was so happy on Lexapro. I was having such a good time there that I forgot that was the thing. I was only depressed when I had good reasons to be.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you are getting into like dissertation mode, so you will have all sorts of emotions that Lexapro can't save you from. I mean, bottom line is that, antidepressants doesn't make you a superhero, but it may make the hard things more manageable.
I think. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So besides Zoloft, which you just went on, can you tell that it's effective yet? or is this just that you're
I don't
sleeping?
know. I think I can't tell. I'm sleeping better and I'm on Zoloft. So in general, I'm feeling a little bit more sane, but I don't know what it is. So
Yeah.
maybe who knows? Maybe I'll turn into a superhero next week after another week of
Yeah.
this.
Are you doing things besides, like, are you in therapy for this, or is it just medication?
Yeah, I think basically have to prioritize as we're talking about, like self-care and like basic needs instead of like
Hmm.
who am I as a person, which my existential crises need to be put on pause. Um, I'm going to exercise more. I'm doing more yoga. I have always on and off seen a therapist, but now I'm seeing her regularly and being more open with I'm struggling with postpartum depression and
Yeah.
um I mean, I'm just mostly talking through all these different pieces, that I summarize right now. And she's kind of just coaching me through like learning to be okay with these shifts, like learning to accept them instead of fight against it and try to get back to my old self,
Yeah.
as hard as I've been trying to do.
I mean, that does seem like the thing to do is is some sort of act of embracing the new normal instead
Mm-hmm.
of trying to fight to reclaim something that's lost. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a grieving process.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge grieving process. Yeah. I think I got to focus on the things in my life that I do value. I still feel great and competent and confident when I do clinical work and see patients. I still really value this podcast. I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of pieces to it that really feel worth it to me to still do. But there's other stuff that, like doing the kind of research and the amount I did before, it does is not worth the amount of the cost of it, right? The
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
away from my baby, the amount of energy it takes me to do things. So and that's a huge loss because what I'm left with. But again, I'm focusing on the basic needs: therapy, sleep, um, SSRIs, exercise, eating well, things like that.
Okay, well, great. I'm glad you're feeling better and getting back to basics. Always here to talk through existential crises, though. And we do want to just say that we're going to go bi-weekly for now, meaning every other week. I really wish there was a separate term for that than 2 times a week.
Mhm.
So we're doing every other week for the foreseeable future, and that is because of everything you've just heard. And I'm about to jump into dissertation land, and so I think we just need to get our feet on the ground before thinking about going back to weekly if that's something we do. So bi-weekly for now. Um, you could probably get us back though to weekly if you rated, reviewed, and subscribed 5 stars. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.